Welcome into Duval Daily, presented by GenJag.com. I'm Jordan Aluga. Thanks so much for tuning in here on Wednesday, March 19th. Good morning to you, Duval. Welcome in, Jags fans. So, is the Jacksonville Jaguars offensive line any better right now than it was entering the 2024 campaign? Is this a better group? That's what we're going to talk about here today. There's certainly been some turnover, right? Since the Jacksonville Jaguars took the field in 2024, or since this time last year. You subtract Mitch Morse, who retires. You subtract Brandon Sheriff, who is a free agent. And you added 3 new guys. So we're going to talk about it here today. Really appreciate y'all tuning in. If you enjoy the content, please like and subscribe. You can also check out genjag.com/shop, pick up some new Duval gear. All right, so again, Mitch Morse retires. He was your starting center. Brandon Sheriff is a free agent. He was your starting right guard. He had started here for a while. Those guys, I think, overall were both very good in pass protection. Brandon Sheriff was still an elite pass protecting right guard, without question. You watch the tape, you look at the numbers, Brandon Sheriff was a really, really good pass blocker. Mitch Morse, I think, probably was past his prime a little bit, also entering a new situation for the first time in a while. And I don't think he had his best year. Ends up retiring after the year. But I still think he was like an average starting center at worst in the NFL last year. So you lose those 2 guys. Obviously, Cam Robinson is in Minnesota, so he's not with the team anymore either. That happened during the middle of the year before the trade deadline. You add offensive lineman, and I say offensive lineman, Patrick McCary, got to get used to that, McCary, who has literally played every position on the offensive line. Everyone. And you also signed center Robert Hainsey from Tampa, offensive tackle Chuma Edoga from Dallas. So how do these guys fit in? I think obviously Robert Hainsey is the center. I think he's your starting center. He's getting paid over $7 million a year. He is the Jaguars starting center in 2025, right? Patrick McCary, just based on what they have here, looks like he's going to be slated in to start at right guard. But he'll have some versatility as well. If there's injuries elsewhere, this is a guy you really can move all over the place. And it's kind of funny. Right guard is the position he has the least experience at in the NFL. He has started games at right guard, but not since 2020, I believe. But he has started games at right guard, and he started games at right tackle. He started games at left tackle, center, left guard. So this guy can literally do it all. Robert Hainsey is a center exclusively. He was their starting center in Tampa until they drafted Barton out of Duke, who's obviously just a supreme talent, Graham Barton, this past year. Somebody who I think is going to be an elite center in the NFL. So Robert Hainsey kind of got replaced in the starting lineup, but he was a starter in Tampa for a couple years. After they lost a pretty legendary center there, he stepped in and did a more than passable job, I would say. Then you also have offensive tackle Chuma Edoga, who comes over from Dallas. He is a depth play. You had last year going into the season, you had 4 offensive tackles on the roster. When you look at Cam Robinson, Anton Harrison, Walker Little, and the rookie Javon Foster, who was a 4th-round pick. Last year's regime obviously wasn't going to cut a 4th-round pick, even though he struggled throughout the offseason and training camp. He did. So Cam Robinson obviously no longer in the building. Walker Little, a starter who's under contract. Anton Harrison, a starter. I think you needed some competition for that 3rd tackle spot. Chuma Edoga brings that in, and I think competition, there's no question that that's going to get the best result for your swing tackle, for your OT3. So I'm happy that the Jaguars decided to bring in some competition there. I don't think he's a needle mover. I would be hopeful that Javon Foster can kind of take a step forward in year 2, because on tape at Missouri, there was a lot of positives to get excited about. with Javon Foster. So hopefully that's like a good competition that ends up netting the Jaguars a good swing tackle, whether it's Udoka or Foster. That would be my hope there. Now, when it comes to the starters, I think McCary, you look at him at right guard, and again, there's not a lot of tape of that, but there's a few games. I'm not really going back to that as much as I am looking at what he did last year at left guard. To me, this is a guy who is a good athlete. I think he moves well. I think he's flexible throughout his frame. It's kind of surprising he didn't get drafted, quite frankly. He was an undrafted free agent in 2019. He's really good in the run game. Really, really good. I think there's times where physically in pass pro, there's some defensive linemen that can just get after him. And so that's a little bit concerning to me, but I think you're getting an upgrade in the run game at right guard. Brandon Scherff, for as good as he has been at pass protection throughout his years in Jacksonville, he fell off in the run game a little bit. And I do look at what the Jaguars had done in the run game and how they had been coached, both from a play calling, offensive scheme, and offensive line standpoint. It was subpar here under Doug Peterson, offensive line wise. I don't think that they were getting the best coaching. I don't think it was the best offensive scheme after 2022, after Jim Bob Cooter left. Things just fell apart, quite frankly. So maybe Brandon Scherff isn't fully to blame, and maybe Mitch Morse isn't fully to blame for some of the woes of the interior run blocking. But I do think that there was some physical limitations with those guys as, players that were 32 years old last year. So I think that McCary comes in and brings a level of run blocking that you didn't have, and I think Robert Hainsey does the same thing. We're going to continue talking about this offensive line first. Got to remind you all about Underdog Fantasy. Grab your phone and your dancing shoes. It is time to make entries on March college basketball with Underdog. Making picks on Underdog is straightforward. Signing up is even easier. Just head over to Underdog's simple-to-use mobile app or UnderdogFantasy.com. Sign up with promo code DuvalDaily, and Underdog will give you a free pick to use on your first cash pick entry, plus up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you deposit to play. Choose whether a player will go higher or lower on one of their stats, i.e. points, assists, rebounds, and more. Y'all already know what I'm looking for. Gator Walter Clayton Jr. to go higher on points. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code DuvalDaily to claim your new customer special of a free pick and your deposit offer. Must be 18 plus, 19 plus, Alabama, Nebraska, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 21 plus, Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. Arizona 1-800-NEXT-STEP. That's 1-800-639-8783 or text NEXT STEP to 53342. New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. So I think the Jaguars are clearly going to be a little better in the run game from a personnel standpoint. I think Hainsey and McCary upgrade you in the run game from what you had last year. I also think there's more grit, more finish, more strain, just younger legs might help with that. Like I said, Morse and Scherff, they were up there. They're in the twilight of their career. I think that these guys will give you a little bit more finish consistently. And I think that that's something to get excited about potentially. But overall, on paper, with these players coming in, I think that they're going to be better in the run game and a little worse in pass pro. I've honestly seen on tape McCary and Hainsey struggle more in pass pro than you did for Mitch Morse or Brandon Scherff over the years. You do get the center experience in the offense with Hainsey coming over from Tampa, having spent last year with Liam Cohen, having started a game last year and playing very well in that game under Liam Cohen. So I think that helps the offensive line as a whole with the communication, with understanding, how to effectively communicate with each other, picking up blitzes, identifying the mic, identifying the defensive fronts, communicating, from Robert Hainsey to Trevor Lawrence. I think that helps Trevor Lawrence's transition into a new offense. So there's definitely some benefits with Robert Hainsey there. I think you also get, like I said, offensive line depth with Chuma Edoga. That competition at tackle, I think, is going to be a positive thing. I think that, last year there was no competition. It was just, this is who's going to be on the roster. We're going to have 4 tackle only type of players, although Walker Little, can play a little inside guard. They're going to have 4 tackles, and that's just what it was. Like, Javon Foster didn't have to earn his spot on the roster last year. Now he does, and I think that's going to be a good thing. And I think McCary, provides depth as well. If you have an injury at any position on the offensive line, you can do some shuffling and figure it out because McCary has the ability to play any spot. That's huge. I mean, you just don't find guys like that very often that can literally play all 5 positions on the offensive line. So I do think that that's a big deal. When you're looking at this offensive line as a whole, I think Walker Little is a better player than Cam Robinson. I've said that for a long time. I think Walker Little has more talent. I think he's bigger, stronger, more athletic. I also think he is a little bit more consistent with his technique. I think Anton Harrison should be better in year 3. He should be better in this system. We have yet to see that, but I think he will be. So I think you're pretty good at the tackle spot. And I think both of those guys can be better in the run game. And you saw steps forward from Anton Harrison in the run game last year at times. I think that you can see this tackle group be an overall big positive for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Interior-wise, again, I think if Liam Cohen creates a cohesive run game and offense, which I believe he will, this group could look a lot better than last year's group on the interior. Again, I think you're a little bit worse in pass pro, but you could be a lot better in the run game because Ezra Cleveland, Robert Hainsey, and Patrick McCary can all get after it in the run game. They're tougher, they're younger than they were, and so they've got some potential excitement there. But I do worry, like when you're dropping back to throw the ball on 3rd and 10. Hopefully you don't have a lot of those situations for one, right? But is that interior group good enough in pass pro? That would be my concern, honestly. It wasn't really a concern for me last year when they were healthy, which they weren't always healthy, obviously. But that would be my concern overall. Is that interior offensive line, specifically center and right guard, going to be good enough consistently in pass pro? And I'm not saying week to week. I think a lot of weeks it will be good enough. But let's say you're going up against the Tennessee Titans. It's the 4th quarter. It's 3rd and 10. Do you have the guys to block Jeffrey Simmons, Tavondre Sweat, whoever else they add to that mix? Right? Houston Texans, Daniil Hunter, Will Anderson, Danico Autry, right? Like, do you have the guys to get that job done in a big moment? That's what really kind of concerns me. I hope they do. And I know that these guys also have big game experience recently, which is, I think, part of the allure of them for this regime. And for me, I still need an interior offensive lineman in the first 3 rounds. They have 4 picks in the first 3 rounds. One of them, to me, has got to be someone who can play on the interior. Because I don't feel comfortable with the depth right now. If you lose one of your top 3, yes, McCary can move over, play wherever, but like, who else is coming in the lineup, right? I need another interior offensive lineman in the first 3 rounds. And I think there's a lot of really good interior offensive linemen to potentially target for the Jaguars in that capacity when you look at who's available in the draft. I think that, I wouldn't be mad if the Jaguars go get Will Campbell at 5. He wouldn't be my pick, but I would not be upset about that one bit. I think that Will Campbell can get the job done at a high level. And the thing about him, too, is, again, you're talking about versatility. If you bring him in here to play guard for you, he could potentially play tackle for you down the road. and he could potentially fill in at tackle and give you more depth and versatility throughout the lineup. But you look at interior offensive line, I would honestly be a little surprised if they go the Tyler Booker route if he's available at 36. The only player that I think that they would select potentially interior offensive line wise or offensive line wise at 5 would be Will Campbell or potentially Armand Membu. I would hope that they would not be in on Kelvin Banks. Josh Simmons doesn't make as much sense because I think he's a tackle only. I think that those are the guys, the only guys that are really kind of considered up there. I would be more okay with Will Campbell than Armand Membu, and I like Armand Membu. I just think he's a player that has gotten pushed up the board a little bit too high. I think in the 10 and after that range, the teens, Armand Membu makes a lot of sense. Tyler Booker, just his lack of overall athleticism makes me think that they might not go in that direction. I still would be a huge fan of them taking Tyler Booker if he was available with their second round pick. I'd be all over that. I love Gray Zabel as well. He feels like a type of guy that this group would be interested in. Donovan Jackson out of Ohio State, I would be fine with him at 36 overall. I would honestly be fine with Marcus Mbow at 36 overall. He could come in and play guard or center for you long term and provide depth because he's a guy that has some experience at all 5 positions. I think he's a guy. You saw him at the Senior Bowl do a little bit of center work, and I think that's where he projects best at the next level. He's played guard and tackle, right? So you also look at Tate Ratledge, probably in the 3rd round, maybe in the 2nd round. He had a really good Senior Bowl. Jared Wilson, Charles Grant. These are guys I think you keep an eye on in the first 3 rounds for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I really would like to see one of them in Jacksonville because – and you could also talk about Jonas Avenea. To me, there's some red flags on his tape. Jonas Avenea, his chest is exposed way too often. I'm not sure why that is. The hands need to be more consistent with punching first, getting hands on the defensive lineman first, protecting that chest. He has all the physical tools to get it done, so maybe it's just a coaching thing. But those are the guys for me that I'd be fired up about to come in and push the veterans you signed and the veterans you have on the interior of the offensive line, also provide depth this year, also be future starters. I think you need that. I really do. Because overall, I think that this group, even with Patrick McCary at $13.5 a year, Robert Hainsey at $7.5 a year, Ezra Cleveland over $9 million a year, Walker Little $15 million a year, I think I'm good with the tackles. But I think you need to still be working to upgrade that interior. I really do. I think they're going to be better in the run game this year. I think they're going to be a little worse in pass pro. But I think either way, you got to work to improve this group. It's not the level it should be when you have a franchise quarterback. And the Jaguars have that. And so I think they need to improve that through the draft. There's a lot of things I think they need to improve through the draft, right? Edge depth, interior defensive line, wide receiver 2, safety, interior offensive line, corner potentially. I hope that they're right about Jordan Lewis or Jarian Jones being able to play outside or maybe flip-flop playing outside, and you just have a solid 3 there. But those are kind of the position groups where I'm like, they need some answers. They really do. So really appreciate y'all tuning in. If you enjoy the content, please like and subscribe. Y'all have a good one.